Let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in
What is that process that a developer, or let's say,
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Clouds. I am your host, Stu Miniman, and I'm really excited today. We have a special all-European edition of In the Clouds to get ready for KubeCon and CloudNativeCon happening in London in just a short couple of weeks. For those of you that watch the show, we generally tend to do this. I'm going to pop in the comments here. We have a link to all of the Red Hat activity happening at the event. First one, of course, is on April 1st, which is generally known as the Day Zero events. OpenShift Commons is there. It is free to attend. You do not need another badge, but registration is limited. Definitely hit the site if you're interested in coming. It's a 5-minute walk from the Excel Center. We've got some phenomenal customers sharing their stories, as well as many people that contribute to many of the projects that we'll be talking about at KubeCon and CloudNativeCon. I will be there. Super excited, and I'm happy to bring onto the program two first-time guests, but people I've known for a lot of years who will also be at the event. So I'm bringing two European analysts to help break down everything that's happening in the wonderful cloud-native ecosystem and everything like that. So first of all, Max Mortillaro, who's coming to us from the Czech Republic, and Arjan Timmerman, who is coming to us from Amsterdam. They are the co-founders of the recently launched Osmium data group. Max and Arjan, great to see you. Looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks in person. Max, I actually got to see you in person recently in your hometown. So thanks for joining me. How you doing?
Yeah, thank you, Stu. Doing good, doing great. And thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure. And it was great to see you in person and exchange a couple of beers as well together. It was really fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, the two of you were nice enough to have me on a video last year at KubeCon Paris, so wanted to return the favor. Max, since you're up on the big screen right now, give us a little bit your background. What's the what and the why of Osmium Data Group?
Absolutely, thank you. So Max Mortillaro, I'm French, Italian. I live in Czech Republic, as you said, for more than 20 years now, and I've been in the let's say data infrastructure space for quite I would say at least a couple of decades now. It's not that much compared to some people, but it's already something. So yeah, we recently started Osmium Data Group with Arjan. We really wanted to, let's say, move to the next level in terms of what we've been doing in the past. So, we've been doing some analyst work in the past with Tech Unplugged, our previous company. We've done that for a tier 2, well-known also analyst company. And when we kind of decided to continue doing that on our own, we've been going with Arjan through a lot of, let's say, iterations on what we want to do and so on, trying to identify, our value proposition and our focus. And of course, since we're both based in EMEA, we wanted to build something in EMEA, right? So that will be the short take on that.
All right, Arjan, same for you. Give us a little bit your background and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Arjan Timmerman. I'm based in the Netherlands, and Amsterdam is close to everybody, so let's keep it at Amsterdam. Been working in the IT for more than 25 years now. Did a lot of enterprises in EMEA. I know that's different from what's going on in the US, but been in the finance world, been at ASML, NXP, so a lot of the bigger European enterprises doing architect work for them. These days I'm working with Hunter Douglas. We have the Osmium group where we spend a lot of our time with, but we also are both still working at customers, providing consultant / architect work for them. That's a bit of my background.
Well, it is a perfect setup for my first question for both of you. So, last year we celebrated 10 years of Kubernetes. There was some big celebration at the KubeCons that went on there. We know that general adoption of not just Kubernetes, but this whole ecosystem, it's not even across the world. And there's certain projects, the one, it's been interesting. I remember going back, I think it was like KubeCon in like 2017 or 2018. Like everybody was like, oh my God, service mesh is really cool. And Istio's this enormous project and everything's awesome. And there were some customers that used it, but like in the last year or two, I've talked to a lot of customers that are now really starting to leverage that. And there's a few projects that really have started to grow up. Of course, containers and Kubernetes, broad adoption, across the world. But if you could give us a little bit, what are you seeing in, the European theater, if you would, as to, where are we with containerization adoption? Are there any projects that you tend to see, more or less than what you might hear at the conference or in other geographies?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. I think it really depends on the industry that you're in, as well as the size of the company. There's a lot going on with the customers, especially in the EMEA part, a lot of regulations, which normally tends to hold the companies back a little from everything that's new. So they're really looking at, okay, so how are we going to utilize this? A lot of the companies, of course, there are companies like Volkswagen, Bosch, to name a few, that Mercedes, that have really large development teams that really want to dive into these kinds of things. And they are at the front, I would say, of introduction of containerized environments, but they develop them themselves. If I look at the customers that I'm having, a lot of them, they are looking at it, but it's more from a perspective of, okay, so we're going to make sure that once this will become bigger and really something that we need for application development or something like that, we have it ready in a state that we can utilize it from a production perspective. And a lot of these companies are still, like you said, at the beginning of that journey. Be it that with everything going on with Broadcom VMware, things seem to go quicker now. A lot of companies are looking into, okay, so if I'm going to move away in the next 2 to 3 years, away from VMware to another platform, how am I going to make sure that that platform provides not only virtualization, but also containerization? And that's what I'm seeing at a lot of the customers that I'm talking to at the moment. They are looking into, okay, so we're still at the beginning of this. How are we going to leverage a platform that can take us away from VMware, but also gives us the opportunity to move into containerization?
Well, and I'm so glad that you clarified, because, a year ago, 18 months ago, everybody's like, oh my God, we need to move fast. You gave a timeline there. You said 2 to 3 years. That's something that, I'm hearing quite a bit, is the typical customer that I run across. They had a renewal. If they were really smart, they locked something in right before everything closed. If not, they negotiated and pushed and everything. But the 3-year contract is what we hear Broadcom is having most people sign up to. I've heard a couple of 5-year contracts for some of the bigger customers, but we all know, look, we all met through the VMware ecosystem, back in the day. Adoption of VMware didn't happen in a year. It was many years, and some of these things took a decade. Switching my platform is not simple. It can take a few years to be able to do that. So planning ahead, not what I think the smart customers are doing. Okay, I've signed the 3-year contract. Now I put a plan in place and I understand when I need to execute on it. So yeah, super important. It is something I know we've heard at the last couple of KubeCons a little bit, and has been one of those underlying technologies that, you know, we didn't talk a lot about virtualization at KubeCon the first few years that I was going, but the last couple of years it's been real prevalent. Max, I want you to be able to, you know, chime in, see, you know, what you're hearing, also your point of view on that question.
So I think Arjan already, you know, replied to some of the points which I had, but the reality is that if he's done that, it's not just because of the observation, you know, of what's going on, but I think it's a general trend, right? So what he's seeing goes into the direction of where most companies are. So if we put the VMware story aside, there's an interesting aspect which he said as well, right? We have different enterprises, different sizes, different industries. Some are regulated, some are not. And of course, some of the industries may be moving faster, others need to move slower because also of the criticality of what they support. My background in the past 10 years has been in the pharma industry. So I'm seeing there the heavy weight of regulations, all of these, you know, complicated compliance, qualification requirements, etc. And interestingly enough, I've been involved in a containerization project for the past year. I was working recently on the roadmap and strategy for that organization. And clearly, one of the interesting exercises there was also to give management a view of where containers are coming from and where it's headed at. And it goes exactly to what you said, like you were talking about 2017, 2018 and Istio service meshes and all. But if you think about it, when we started talking about that in our VMware community, by the way, Docker was the big thing at the day, right back in the day, right? And now, who's talking about Docker anymore? I mean, they're still here. You still have Docker containers, but Kubernetes has become the de facto standard for you know, orchestration. Containerd is the way you consume images today. So a lot of change is happening, and you need, and at the same time, there is this level of, how to say, I wouldn't say industrialization, but it's getting more and more production grade. Enterprise grade is the right word, I guess. So the exciting thing there is see how all these things are coming together, and what is the transition roadmap in a way, because one of the aspects is that, of course, you have different demands. So some organizations, like Arjan said, are building their own stuff on containers. They're actively developing stuff. The other thing is that sometimes containerization is being kind of forced into the organizations because the vendors are changing the way they develop software. So even commercial software, which was previously delivered as OVAs in VMware, for example, is now getting developed, let's say, handed over to customers as containers. And the customers have to do their due diligence to build an environment to support that. So I would say, to keep it short, that's what I'm seeing, you know, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I want to follow up on the skill set and careers, because I know one of the big difference in Europe is, you know, the laws around like employment and changing jobs or, you know, getting skill set can be a little different. We're going to be in London. I've met with many of the large financial services companies there. And what's really interesting is if you talk to them, you know, they all move around in certain circles. You know, we had a very large OpenShift customer that was an early adopter, and many of the people that started in that company permeated throughout many of the other companies, and then helped, you know, the early adopters moved on to the next companies and helped them with their technology adoption. But, you know, we know from, you know, both the virtualization community and in the cloud native community, there's not, you know, so many people that understand these skill sets or have gone through the training, or maybe they've had certification for a year and they might be hesitant to take it, or there could be laws in place that make it a little bit tougher. So I'm curious, you know, if there's any kind of European angles on kind of the skill set and mobility that you could touch on.
Yeah, so I'll give my perspective. It's probably not going to cover all of the questions that you had, but if I look purely, putting the laws aside and looking purely at the skill set, it's true that it was, I would say, way easier to you know, skill or retrain in VMware versus the container world, because if you look at the CNCF landscape, it is so much spread out, so many components, so many interactions, that you cannot possibly, you know, master everything. On the other hand, the good thing is that you have a lot of trainings which are available, you know, and if you come from the Linux world, it is kind of a I would say almost a there's already a path which is traced to go towards that direction. I think it's really important there to start with having a couple people in the team which are well trained. Then as you say, get those people to onboard the others, train them, and so on. One of the things I'm seeing as well, and I'm talking here about my teams, is that I'm really encouraging them to go out, to be curious, to take any kind of certifications and trainings that are available for free, and even explore commercial certifications. Another point which is kind of not exactly related, but somehow the reason why organizations, and it's my point of view on that, and I'm diverting away from containers, but I'm going typically into OpenShift, OpenStack versus VMware, right? A lot of organizations tended to go with VMware because they had a product which was, fairly simple, easy to set up, and kind of manage with unskilled labor or lower skilled labor. This is not to be dismissive of the VCPs, VCAPs, VCDX, and so on. I mean, you can definitely build complex architectures with VMware. But the companies wanted to get cheap labor and get a commercial solution which was relatively affordable. And now the problem that you have is that you have a solution which has become very expensive, and you still do not have the skill set in-house to manage the transition. So now you are finding yourself in a position where everybody's wanting to move away from VMware. Everybody's looking at options. What do we do? How do we do stuff with containers? And I would say, at least that's my perception, that there's not necessarily enough skilled people available on the market. But I'd be curious, to hear what Arjan has to say on that as well.
Yes, I think a lot has been said already by Max. So if we go back and to your original question, if you look at the regulations, especially for work labor, there's a lot of regulations in the EMEA region, which I think makes it a different kind of workforce. And like you already mentioned, a lot of people move from their own perspective. So they learn something at a company, take that with them and go to another company. Where in the US, if you look at the recent layoffs that we've had in a lot of the industry, it is different. The other thing is, I think it goes back to what we already talked about, is about when do people get trained on a certain topic? So a lot of the things that are still going on within the EMEA region, especially with the companies that aren't really investing into the containerized environments, is that they keep doing what they already did. And a lot of them go into hybrid cloud, and they will be trained on Microsoft Azure in general, because a lot of the EMEA region is Azure mainly. So a lot of the people are trained in that, but not that much on the containerized environment. So I really think there's still a lot that needs to be done to get the people really educated in Kubernetes, Docker, Istio, you name it, everything. Networking, another one that's really important, I guess, with the containerized environments as well. But there's still a lot to do, I guess, for the EMEA region. There's not that many people that I know of that moved from either VMware or something else into the containerized world and are really educated in that part. So there's a lot to do on the EMEA region side, I think.
Yeah, some interesting comments there. We absolutely see there's a general trend is, how do we simplify things? We know this ecosystem, we all talked about it. There's a lot of choice out there. If you talk about like on Azure, our partnership with from Red Hat that we do with Microsoft is a managed service on top of it. So you need less people that really understand containers and Kubernetes. I just want to deal with my applications above that. And when I talk to some of the analysts out there, they see that as a real trend. And part of it is because we just don't have enough people that are going to learn that skill set. So, the whole promise of like PaaS and, developer platforms in general was I don't want to think about that underlying piece. Those of us in infrastructure know about it, but we want to make it easy for the people on top of it. That's why I've been pretty excited about things like platform engineering and something that is talked about heavily at the show. Yeah, let's switch and talk about KubeCon itself. So, it's expected. I've heard the number is going to be 14,000 is what the cap is at it, and it is expected to kind of reach that number, which is phenomenal. It's the European shows have actually been bigger than the U.S. shows, and typically when you go there, you go to the opening keynote, and they said, "How many people is it your first time?" And they do surveys on it. It is more than half of the people are first-time attendees. I know you both had been a bit. I was actually looking through my notes, getting ready for this, and it's actually my 9th KubeCon, my 4th European, and I've done 5 US ones. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, I probably would have evened out that number, because the last couple of years I've been at the European one and I haven't gone to the US one. And Arjan, next year we're back, your hometown of Amsterdam, which was a phenomenal show 2 years ago. So want to ask, what you're most excited about at the show, what you're looking forward. What does an analyst do at the show? And the quick plug I'll give, look, Red Hat, anybody that goes to the show, you're going to see Red Hat. We're like the first booth when you walk in. If you get there early in the day, you can get one of these like red fedoras. They'll be all over the place. The one I brought with me for my trip, actually, I got before I joined Red Hat. It was at the Barcelona show in 2019. And the other thing, we're super excited. We actually will have like mini labs in our booth. So if you want to come get like 5-10 minutes of hands-on and then learn where to follow up, which is a great way. We talk about skill set. Some of these things aren't as tough as we think, but that first step can be difficult. So yeah, Max, why don't we start with you, if you could. What's an analyst do at the KubeCon and Cloud Native show in 2025?
Yeah, so analysts sometimes have a reputation to be a bit kind of, let's say, scorny. I don't know if it's the right word, but we tend to be looking at things with, being like with contempt, or being like thinking, yeah, this is never going to work, or something like that. It's not really that. I mean, really, one of the first things I would say, even before, of course, the technology aspect is important, right? So I would be usually favoring going to a KubeCon versus going to a conference about mobile phones, right? But one of the first things I would say is kind of getting the temperature of the event, right? You already start seeing how many people are there, how vibrant it is, what is happening in general. And I have to say that KubeCon here, and especially the last year's edition in Paris, was just mind-blowing. It was, and we always talk about that with Arjan, it was like VMware, VMworld in its heyday, basically, right? So the thing we go is, of course, try to get a feeling about the temperature of the room. It's not necessarily an indication of adoption, because it can be very heavily on the developer side, but then still you don't see exactly the adoption on the enterprise side, which is what we noted last year, for example. But also you go there to understand where the technology is headed at, have conversations with many people, not just people, not just hearing what's happening at the keynote from the CNCF and what is the general trend, but you also want to look at what the vendors are doing as well, right? The expo show, the expo floor, where we get to meet you and all of the other companies, I think is really important, because that's where you get a feel of the, let's say, the ecosystem in general, right? I mean, you can have a technology, but if you don't have a really vibrant and rich ecosystem, a lot of companies around building stuff and innovating, you get what's happened, for example, at VMworld last year, right? Where you go to a place where there are like a quarter or a third of what was there 10 years ago, a lot of space between booths, etc. I mean, we go there to learn and to report on that. That's, I would say, to keep it short, my answer.
Yes, yeah, I'll give a little bit more information on that. So, Osmium Data Group. The middle word is what we focus on. It's data, and I think one of the things that I just saw is that you will give a keynote, and it is around the weight of data, rethinking cloud-native systems for the age of AI. That's a Red Hat keynote, and it is really why we are going to these events, especially to the Kubernetes one. it is really important for us. And last year we were in like Max already said, we did a couple of videos, and most of them were either data storage, but also how are we going to make sure that if we are going into containerized worlds, how are we going to utilize that data? And I think one of the things that will be even bigger this year than what we've seen last year is the AI stuff. So I think it's really key for us to look at, okay, so what is going on in the Kubernetes world, in the containerized environments, and what do we see on the data side of things? I think that's the most important for us to look at. And there's one more aspect. I think Max already mentioned it. Also having talks with peers in the industry, like you last year, Stu, and there's more. I think that's really important. We've always done that, and that was a big thing for VMware. I think we could even make that bigger in the KubeCon environment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've said it in every video I've ever done about KubeCon. The hallway track is one of the things that we all go to. Last year, I was thankful you guys tracked me down because I was so busy with meetings. This year, I'm busy, but I'm not at capacity like I was in Paris. So I'm a little bit happy about that because there were just, there's nothing worse than I hate than like I'm going to the airport and I'm like looking back and I'm like, oh, I didn't see this person. Oh, I didn't stop by this booth. Oh, I didn't learn about this other thing. And it's like, okay, well, you know, we know you're never going to hit all of it every time, but it's good. My friends at the Cube are going to be there. I actually did a preview with them for KubeCon, so we'll throw the link in the chat here because of course Red Hat we're thrilled to be able to be the headline sponsor for that again. So Arjan, you mentioned that keynote that we're doing. The funny thing is it's a 5-minute keynote, so it's like it's really compacted, and then a little bit later they'll come on the Cube and they can spend 20 minutes breaking down and explaining it more. We've got in the expo hall, we've got a demo, a hands-on demo, and the day before they'll be on the Cube explaining all of the pieces. So it's that mix of if you're there in person and you want to listen or touch, and if you're not, you know, they can pop to the link, which will do that. Cool. So I think we're ready to get some rapid fire questions from a Red Hat. All right. I hope you're both ready. Arjan, we're going to start with you, and Max, you can jump in after it. You hit the magic buzzword, and I was a little worried we weren't going to talk about it. AI. You know, I think it's the longest I've gone in the last year plus of In the Clouds without talking about artificial intelligence. So here's the question for both of you. Arjan first. How does AI fit into your work?
Sorry, could you repeat it?
How does artificial intelligence fit into your work?
So I think looking at it pure from a work side, generative AI is things that we really use from a day-to-day perspective, especially if we look at the Osmium data group. Of course, we're analyzing stuff. We're asking ChatGPT about, okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about this? Can you give us more information? How should we structure this? So there's a lot that is going on with AI. We had a discussion with Max a couple of days ago as well. If I look at it from a company perspective, from the customers that we have, there's still a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of, okay, so if I'm going to do that, how am I going to do that? How do I make sure that my data is still my data and not from somebody else? But I'll leave it at that. Let Max talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. So I would say from the Osmium perspective, what Aaron said is absolutely on point. We are seeing that as a, let's say, an assistant on steroids. primarily to help us with productivity, right? Accelerating stuff that is time-consuming, tedious, and that you don't necessarily want to do. We still leave a lot of space for us to do the analysis work ourselves. So that's it from the, let's say, Osmium standpoint, right? And making sure that we double-check, verify text, etc. So more kind of an assistant capability. If I look at customers, there is broadly different, and it's going to really depend on the use case, and I'm sure that you'll hear that all over again. We're looking primarily, if I take the case of my customer, we're looking at ways of doing that to actually deliver value. It's not just for experimenting, but see how we can solve the pain points that we have, cumbersome problems. We're not trying to build the next, huge thing or send a man beyond Mars and on Neptune or whatever, or into the oblivion of the sun. But we're looking really at simple stuff like we have those old, ancient, cumbersome processes. We have a lot of regulatory stuff that we need to sort out. How do we use AI to our benefit, right? How do we streamline stuff? So that's it.
Okay. Yeah. I asked Copilot real quick about the two of you, and it hasn't yet gotten the word about Osmium Data Group. So we're helping to get that word out. They still had you listed as Tech Unplugged and some of that stuff. But at least it actually knew who both of you were, and the data was good, as opposed to we had an internal presentation about AI, and somebody on my team did it, and he just searched in it, and it was like, oh, he's got a PhD and he's done this. When Google first launched theirs, it said that I was a best-selling author on cloud computing, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Where's my royalties? And being Google, even, I was like, can you give me a link to the book? And it's like, no. It's like, well, where's it mentioned? And it gave me a broken link to, some article that didn't exist. So yeah, it's good. And to your point, we had last year at Red Hat Summit, one of my favorite sessions. I got to moderate a panel, and we had AI Sweden, which is an incubator done by the government for the Nordics, and they have all these different industries, and they're using it. So, the question we all have coming into this year is, when do we go from like the I'm learning and I'm experimenting to really getting more value out of it? And there's some companies that are. We've got at OpenShift Commons, we've got one AI customer, super excited. They're going to talk about their journey. They're a big company. They've been working on AI for years. Generative AI is just a continuation of the journey they've been on. For the companies that are more like, oh, hey, I need to find some people and they need to go work on this. I didn't have data scientists. We know it's going to take a little longer. All right. Hey, Max, let's come back to you for the next question, since we started Arjan on the last one. We all met through the communities. So I'm curious, in kind of the, today's landscape, how do you keep in touch with your tech community peers through social networks, Slack, Discord, Tech Field Day, all those kind of things? What's your favorite method of keeping in touch when they don't show up in Prague to be able to go out to a beer with you?
It's a good one, and I think we discussed that topic when we were having beers, actually. So it's really cool. So the community was kind of, and it's kind of I don't know if it's an epochal thing or whatever, but the community was built, I would say, thanks to Twitter back in the day, right? So it was really the place where people would be having conversations and so on. So with the, let's say, major changes we've seen on Twitter, purchase, demise, whatever you want to call it, this fragmentation of social media, it's become a bit more difficult first to be in touch with people. So obviously, we have now various sub-communities. And so using Discord to be in touch with the community, for example, which is really a small subset of the old VMware community. The other aspect to that, by the way, before I move to tools and solutions, is that we started, I'm thinking about 10, 15 years ago, maybe some 20 years plus ago with VMware, right? And it's not just the technology that changes. People also change. People move to different careers, different roles. So it kind of inevitably fragments, right? And that's why you see a lot of people which went towards the side of containers. People went towards, observability, security, whatsoever. So even that kind of natural change is happening there. But if I was to put it in terms of social networks, we're experimenting with Blue Sky, which is kind of a good technical replacement to Twitter. It's not as populated, I would say. We've tried Mastodon, which is kind of a beast of its own somehow. I would say LinkedIn remains the primary place to go for any kind of professional level communications. Then in terms of community, you mentioned Tech Field Day, the Tech Field Day Slack, and the Tech Field Day community has been kind of the backbone of keeping all of us kind of together, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with Max on that one. I think a lot of what we are looking for is especially on the Tech Field Day community side, and a lot of that is on Slack, and the other one is LinkedIn. For us, LinkedIn is one of those platforms that is really important, and a lot that's going on also with the community is on LinkedIn. So I would say that would be an addition to what Max already mentioned.
Awesome. Yeah, and for those that are interested, you can actually find our Blue Sky links in the YouTube description. So the three of us are on there. I was showing Max when we got together, those of us that use Twitter and like TweetDeck, there is, if you just go to deck.blue, you can actually get somebody created a similar type of experience. So, I've had one of my tabs, in that deck is, of course, searching for hashtag KubeCon. So there's some of the people from the community that I'm like, oh, cool, I've been seeing them pop up. I've been putting things out there, and it is nowhere near what peak volume was back in the day for Twitter, but I've started to see events pop up there. reInvent was pretty good on there. KubeCon has been pretty good on there, and you can connect with some of the people there. All right, last question from the Red Hat. Let's bring it home with KubeCon itself. What projects or products are you looking forward to learning about the most at the conference?
I'll start off with this one. We mentioned it before. It's data, and I think a lot of the data objectives are, especially on the Kubernetes side of things, are object storage. So that would be one of the things that I'll be looking for. But also from an AI perspective, how am I going to make sure? And we already had some talks with some of the providers of storage on that part. How am I going to leverage kind of the two sides, which is the storage and the data lakes and all that kind of stuff that's going on with AI, and on the other side, how am I going to make sure that the LLMs and everything that's going on, the machine learning, how am I going to make sure that I'm able to do that as well? So bringing those two together, looking at what we've heard from the storage providers is still a difficult thing to do. So I'm really looking forward on seeing what is going on that part.
Yeah, for me, it's so partially also what Arjan said, because we've been very traditionally focused on everything data infrastructure, so data storage, data protection, data management, especially data management, and so on. And that's a key thing, of course. But this year, one of the things that I am particularly interested into, and I believe it's the same for Arjan, is we want to look at let's say the topic of VMware migration, basically, right? Because it's really important. It's something which is on everybody's agenda. I think Arjan gave some very good timelines here, 2-3 years. Everybody's kind of sorting that out, and we want to understand basically what options are there. How can organizations run those workloads side by side, containers and VMs, easily migrate from one to the other, have this kind of unified management plane, and kind of enterprise grade capabilities, because there's one thing, if you are a cloud native organization and you've already implemented those practices and you already do development, then it's easy. You're not going to look specifically for that. You go there, you know what you look at. You're looking at whatever observability solution, you're looking at a specific storage solution and so on. But what we're trying to understand as well is, how does this impact organizations which are starting this journey, that are different level, and they need to conciliate some of these technical requirements and the kind of enterprise-grade support, management, compliance imperatives, right? So that's what I would say I'm looking for this year.
All right. Well, hey, thank you. You guys did good with the questions from the Red Hat. So nice job there. And look, when it comes to data, look, we know it's one of the hardest things on there. So, in the virtualization environment, one of the toughest things is I've got my VMware state. How do I deal with the storage over there? We've been working at Red Hat really closely with a broad spectrum of the storage providers. We had many years of the hyperconverged infrastructure. Most of the companies that were interested in HCI went that direction already. The ones that didn't, they might have their 3-tier architecture. Can I keep that in a more modern way? And the answer is yeah. We've got CSI drivers. We're working really close with Dell, HP, Infinidat, the data protection companies like Cohesity and Trilio, Rubrik, and the like. And then if I don't have my data estate in order, forget it. You're not going to be able to take care of AI. It's like automation. If I had a bad process and I try to automate it, it's going to be a nightmare. From an AI standpoint, if I don't understand the data and where I have, I'm not going to be able to do things that are important for my business. So, I guess the long story short, I think Osmium Data, group, you will have your hands full, lots of conversations. There's lots of vendors that love to talk to you on that, and it's a challenge that pretty much every company's got to deal with. So I'll let you both, just final takeaways that you'd like, and it's been great talking to you. So Arjan, you want to last word first?
Yeah, sure. No problem at all. Yeah, really thankful for being on the show, first of all. So thanks for that. Really looking forward to be at KubeCon. We'll definitely look you up because it's always great to have these conversations, especially on camera. Really looking forward to what this year will bring. There's a lot going on in the world that creates a lot of buzz, but also a lot of, I would say, thinking about, okay, so we went a certain way in the last couple of years. Is that still what we want to do, or are we going to maybe deviate a little bit from the path that's been there for the last couple of years, and are we going to change a little bit? So really looking forward to what's going on this year.
Yeah, thank you, Arjan. And for me, as a closing comment, I think that's probably the direction you are going to as well. So first of all, thanks for having us. The thing which I kind of missed talking about, because it's kind of fast-paced and live, is there are some aspects which we didn't talk about, which are really important. The questions around data sovereignty, around data privacy, and so on. All of these topics are hugely important. We also cover sustainability as other aspects, and that's something that we also are going to look at when we're going to be at KubeCon. So really thank you, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, it's awesome discussion, both of you. It's interesting. I think back, the early days, Kubernetes came out of Google, and we originally thought it's like, oh, well, Google was a little bit behind, so they need to create this thing to make it easy to be able to move between clouds. You talk about data sovereignty, you talk about AI, we're having a lot more conversations about the on-premises part of hybrid cloud. To your point, it's many of the companies we work with, there's applications or there might be training I need to do in the cloud, but if it's my data, I want to have that disconnected environment. I want to be able to keep my arms around it and things like that. So it's interesting. I've been saying on this show for the last year or so, we call it in the clouds, but the cloud is more of an operational model than it is a location. Max, Arjan, thank you again. It's awesome joining you. Big shout out Rohan, who's my producer in Switzerland. As I said, we've got an all European show. Loved having this conversation, and look forward to seeing you both in London. So thanks as always, everyone, for watching. Be sure to check out all the details about KubeCon, CloudNativeCon, OpenShift Commons. Check out Arjan and Max at the Osmium Data Group. And until next time, thank you, as always, for joining us on your journey in the clouds.